Warning. The system has become unstable.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. This next song is called not psychic terrorism. We just did that. This is called The Digital Messiah. And if you follow any of my stuff, you'll see me talking about it. You'll hear me talk about it. You'll read me write about it. And that is the late, great Scott, the Digital Messiah Blair. So Scott was, I don't know, a decade or a dozen years my senior. And in 87 or 88, I briefly played drums with his brother in law in his brother in law's band. Um, Mostly in rehearsal sessions as sort of a backup drummer, but I did a little bit of stuff with them too, more than that. At any rate, Scott picked us up one time to, I don't know, he was taking us to rehearsal or he was taking us to a performance of something. I don't know what we were doing, but I remember that's when I met him and people kept telling me I had to meet this guy. He's a real Satanist, he's not a kid, he's not a teenager. I mean, he's an adult. And he had just done his service, like 4 or 5 years, whatever, in the Marine Corps, and had gotten out, was married, had a couple of kids, and had really, again, he was just a mentor of mine, and talked about meeting Carlo LeVay in Amsterdam when he was over there in the Corps. And so when he came out, he entered law enforcement, like a lot of people do, coming out of the military, and he was a sheriff's deputy for several years. And so again, that was 87, and so he was sort of a spiritual advisor for the Infernal tradition, which at that time the group incarnate was the Knights of the Black Circle. Then when I got out of the military and in 91, and uh, he we bumped into one another at a local occult store, and so me and Scott, Johnny Romano, and JD Alder, I'd already the group had continued to go on. And in fact, in '87, when the group started, there was me and two other people that started the Knights of the Black Circle, and we didn't intend to have a cult. We weren't trying to be cult leaders. We weren't trying to be leaders of any kind. We were just friends, but we had dozens of people that saw us as their leaders, and so then they sort of elected me as the high priest and all that muckety muck stuff. And anyway, so it was just all very happenstance. There was no intentionality involved. And so in 91, so he was about a decade or a dozen years my senior. JD Alder, I believe, was 23 years my senior. And then Johnny Romano was also like a decade, a dozen years my senior. And so I still had dozens of disciples, initiates, followers, various levels of commitment and sincerity and longevity involved. And so they were all of a singular voice. They were a chorus saying, all right, we need to finalize this. We need to make this loosey-goosey thing into something real. And you are our leader, okay, which is a crazy, insane thing to hear from people so much older than me that were really, each one of them was a mentor to me in very different and profound ways. And anywho, but Scott took the reins of it and ceased being a spiritual advisor and became the spearhead of the foundation of the Infernal Grotto, the Order of the Infernal Grotto, the Infernal Order, the Infernal Tradition, Infernal Paganism. We called it all kinds of things. And our group of four that were the spearhead of its real organizational reshaping, rebranding, we were referred to as the Four Horsemen, and we called ourselves the Order of the Apocalypse. And this is even detailed in some religious encyclopedia going back 20 something years ago. So it's not just some flippant thing off the top of my head. Anywho, um, so Scott eventually, he joined. We were all at some point. Everybody was a Church of Satan member at some point, and then I was ordained. And of course, as I always say, I haven't been involved with the Church of Satan in any way, shape, or form for over 2 decades. But I was a Church of Satan priest back in the day, and so we had the grotto, and we rebranded a couple of times. And so when I had my occult store, my satanic occult store with my ex-wife, Pandora's Box, we rebranded as Nepotism Grotto because all these people were involved in my life, and they worked at my store and ran my store, and they were my road crew for my band, and half my band members were Church of Satan members, and on and on and on and on. Business associations, romantic associations, college buddies. I mean, it was every aspect of our life. And so So we called it Nepotism Grotto, because Mutual Admiration Society. And so Scott became a colleague. He is still a mentor in so many ways, but he became a colleague. And Scott and I were always involved. Even at some point when Johnny Romano had gone his own way, and then at some point, same with John Alder. It was always Scott and I, and so I had real love for him, like a big brother. And then he and his family bought the house directly next door to the house that my ex-wife and I owned with our family, and then on the other side of his house were his in-laws. So it was very cool. But the the real membership of the Nepotism Grotto, um, all lived within a 2-mile radius of me. And then I spoke about a gentleman, who had contacted me, who went it was he was in school for computers at the time. Then he went in the military. I think he went off to war, and then he was a police officer. Anyway, so he became a real inner circle part of the Nepotism Grotto a couple years later, and he lived in West Palm Beach. And so, other than him, everyone else on the inner circle, about a dozen people, all lived within a 2-mile radius of me. Which, again, I mentioned just because it's I've had so many people over the years saying how, they've looked, literally, I've had people tell me for decades and could not find a singular other Satanist, and I had all these people within a 2-mile radius. And to just beat the band, literally next door was my original spiritual mentor, guide, and my colleague, and my partner, and all of these ventures. And he died at a very young age. I believe it was from cancer, in his early 50s. I think he might have been about the age I am now. And he had a, full military honors, honor guard, Marine Corps send away, and all that stuff. And I'm very happy for him in that regard. And so he did, the interior sleeve art for my Crew Simulation of the Human Collective CD, Jesus of BORG, and the Collective, our first independently released CD. And so it's a trapezoidal altar, it's a ziggurat altar. And on top is it's a computer. It's, digital God, the digital Messiah, right? AI and all that kind of thing. And then you have these three multicolor. Well, they're each a singular different color, like green, blue, red, something like that. But they're sort of like translucent, metallic almost, and their sheen, kind of like the liquid metal, Terminator kind of thing, but with colored. And they're on their hands and knees bowing before the digital Messiah. So, and that was his online handle, was Digital Messiah. So often referred to him as the Digital Messiah. And or Scott the Digital Messiah Blair. And anyway, so I wrote this song. It's about a lot of different things, but it's titled after him, and it's sort of my ode to him, my gift to him, to say, man, I love you, and I deeply appreciate the role you have played in my life, transitioning me from a young, boy, a teenage idealistic Satanist, into a man that lived satanically, and had an amazing adventures that he took apart, and so often. And I'll say this with a lot of the inner circle people, or what I consider the upper echelon of the Infernal Order, is sometimes, they didn't take part in our everyday things, and some did, just so you understand. But Scott was a very busy man. He was, after law enforcement. He was lawfully a hacker. He was in that kind of thing, and worked in that IT world. And so had his wife and his kids and his whole, computer world thing that he was a part of, that wasn't our thing. But anything important with media, anything important with all our ceremonies, that were considered, really important, that, all hands on deck kind of thing. Like my specific parties, like my life, because of my band and so many other things, my life pretty much was a party. It really, I mean, it was a party more days out of the week than not. I mean, anyway, but then we would have very specific parties, and those things were epic. And he and some others that, that they would make sure to show up for that stuff. It's like, oh, you're putting on a party, I'll be there. and it was always one of those people, if you were involved with me on the regular, you knew the players and you knew who was important and that kind of thing. But for those that were new, circling through, coming through the revolving door, or maybe even staying a while, but new, he was one of those people where it was always they knew. It's like, look, when you talk to this guy, you're talking to me. How you respect him or disrespect him is how you respect or disrespect me. And if he likes you, you're golden, in my opinion. And if he doesn't like you, you're gonna lose your invitation. So, anyway, that's Scott Blair. I know I've jabbered on, but it's hard to say enough good about such a good person, and such a important person in my life and in my background, and it's so very sad to me that he left this world so very young. And um and I'll tell you, when I was his priest, when I was both, as the Infernal Order and a Church of Satan priest at the time, his wife had a spinal surgery. I think, if I recall correctly, it was where the spine and the neck meet. And I remember looking at the imagery with him and the surgeon as they were putting like metal rods or something in there to, make sure she was not paralyzed and could continue to walk and live her life. And It was terrifying. If you can imagine, what your spine looks like, the vertebrae, and then like parts of it were like so withered away, it was like almost nothing there. And then they had to fuse it with the good vertebrae, to save her quality of life. And that was one of many instances over the years where, as a satanic priest or infernal priest, or however we want to address that or apply that to me, it's not a title. It's not about me being puffed up and self-important. It's a title for a function, and this was the kind of thing that was relevant to that function, and it was humbling. It was overwhelming. It was unforgettable. So, Scott Blair, I love you, man. This is for you. This is the Digital Messiah.
Hey, let's do some more product endorsements. What else do we have?
Fetch parties.
Marlboro Light 100s. We like them a lot. But the preferred stock is Job 1.5s.
Fluff-Girl, call it Fluff-Girl. This song is about my next door neighbor who was a mentor to me when I was a kid. This is for Scott Blair, Hail Satan. What's up, ladies in the corner?
All right, hey, that song was always dedicated in our shows, always dedicated to Scott Blair, whether he was at the show or not. You know, and obviously most of the shows he was not involved with because as a working band, we played all the time and we didn't play in our hometown, frequently, most often, and so when we played locally, he would make some of those shows, and it was always such a joy for me to to acknowledge him and to dedicate the song to him. So the song always was and always will be dedicated to Scott, the digital Messiah Blair. Hail Scott. And hail Satan. People of the internet, go do some devil stuff.
Warning. The system has become unstable.